In the absence of metacognition, there's no chance for the disconnection between the energy body and thoughts. It's like a car that can't shift out of gear into neutral because the thoughts are always taken seriously because they're never questioned. So they aren't always believed by the conscious mind, but it's the unconscious, the amygdala, the parts of the brain that react to thoughts despite the conscious mind knowing that they don't represent an actual real circumstance, right? So in the absence of metacognition, there's no questioning of thoughts, and therefore they have free rein to trigger us. In a technologically advancing society where the technology exposes us to more and more information, accelerates the pace at which we have to process content, in the absence of metacognition, we are like popcorn kernels, and we're in the popper. And the technology is what increases the temperature. It increases the pace at which content confronts us and triggers the energy body. And it also changes the nature of what's perceived through algorithms that target the handles inside each of us, right? So ultimately, liberation is in realizing the non-self nature, in experiencing the realization of the non-self nature of phenomena in a way that unhooks the energy body from content and circumstance. And in that liberation of the energy body from content is the ascension. It takes a noticing of thoughts, though. Otherwise, there's unconsciousness. There is the belief in being the character that appears in the high thread count dream that is what we call reality. In body identification, there's just a constant reacting to thought and circumstance that holds us vibrationally to a certain level, and we have a taste for that vibration, though we probably would not admit it. Like, people don't admit that they have a taste for the lower register of the emotional spectrum, like anger. Like, people have an appetite for it. It's not a conscious, they don't think, oh, I just need something to get angry about. It's not like that at all, but that's the way it turns out, right? Like, it just happens. There's some kind of, that's why rage bait is rage bait, because there's something that hungers for it. But when the energy body has ascended in vibration by virtue of its unencumbrance, it's no longer automatic believing. It destroys that appetite. Such a low vibration idea, thought complex, thing that triggers reaction, well, firstly, it's not recognized as being related to the self, meaning in the absence of body identification, to what does any circumstance or idea apply? It's like seeing something attacked in a video game. There's no reaction to it, at least not internally, because we're talking about thoughts here. We're not talking about a physical attack, but a conceptual one that in the unconsciousness of body identification is believed to be real by the amygdala. That's no longer the case because there's a discernment. It's like whatever it is that gets close to you when you have an appetite for anger, it can't get close to you when the spiritual heart reflects the truth, the palpable truth, vibrates at the level of love, and is repellent to those things that have an appetite for fear-based emotions. That's not to say that the form won't react and defend itself in an automated fashion under the right circumstance, but no idea is going to present some appetizing opportunity to taste rage. Like, that just doesn't come around. It's like the analogy I've talked about before about like the thermocline. You know, you have a body of water, a deep one, where there's different levels of like temperature or water pressure, and in that water column, you know, fish, they congregate at different levels, different types of fish. Well, thought complexes are similar. The assemblage point, this non-perceivable point of perceiving where all the sense data is picked up. See, it's not just thoughts, it's feelings too. There's always the feedback from the senses. You know, there's the place where the body touches the floor. If you're sitting on the floor or standing, there's the sensation of breathing and, of course, energy, just non-conceptual perception. Because it is correlated with the body, it creates the sense of body identification. But what if, subsequent to the end of believing in being the subject of thoughts, there's also the believing of not being the body that relates to physical sensation, like the feelings that are perceived as being generated by the body are taken impersonally as just sense data. There is a kind of metacognition, not just around the conceptual thoughts, but like a meta-perception, a perceiving of sensations and a questioning of the validity of their claim to, you know, represent an effect placed upon the self. That rather than that, those sensations can be just viewed as sense data. That's a projection from the dependently originated form that projects this reality based on the point in time and space, you know, at which the fistula began, right? I've talked about the block universe and how what the body is really is a fistula through it. It's a projector into the astral. And the block universe, you know, it's like basically the four-dimensional cube of reality, you know, each moment being a salami slice, like a ballistic gel cube, you know, through which a bullet passes. It creates a channel. Well, the walls of that channel are the physical form, and it projects a subtle projection of reality into the space of that tunnel, and the awareness is the space in that tunnel. We are that space. We are that which is aware of what's projected. So the fistula is the projector, the body, and that which is projected is a representation of the world that is changeable, the world of change, the dimension of change. There appears to be free will. As long as there's believing in being that body and being the subject of the thoughts that are projected about it, then the vibrational level of the energy body will be a function of circumstance, of thought. The physical circumstance and the perception of the thought life is also karma. The whole thing, it's just an arrangement of what's perceived. and there's the subtle and the gross. So metacognition is what allows for this, the questioning of the nature of thoughts and the legitimacy of their claim to relate to anything that can be what perceives them. It's just an automatic believing in the absence of metacognition. So what is it that precipitates this metacognition? Well, anything is possible, so it could just be a serendipitous noticing, but more often than not, it's due to suffering. There is the noticing of suffering, and there is the questioning of its cause. If the belief is that there is just an improper arrangement of circumstance that's causing the unhappiness, then the normal mode of relief will be undertaken, and that is to change that unwanted reality, change that circumstance. That's the effectiveness of the teeth of the gears of thought on the teeth of the gears of the energy body. The thought reliably turns the energy body and thus gives impetus to the physical body to do something to change stuff, right? So in a natural world, there's a regulation kind of that. The reaction is appropriate to the circumstance, because in the non-believing of the conceptual self, right? Before the advent of the conceptual self, before the knowledge of good and evil, the reaction of the body to circumstance is appropriate, right? There's a danger of some kind, or there is an opportunity of some kind, a bounty to be had. Well, nature kind of, imposed limiting factors on that, as I said in a previous video, make for the non-needing of a governor, right? We are hungry for every opportunity that could appear in a natural state, and just sort of the limited nature of available things for sustenance in the natural environment makes it appropriate and the best survival strategy to exploit whatever opportunity appears as, greedily as possible. But in the belief in the conceptual self, the relational agent, the creation of time, the ability to conceptualize a future in which the conceptual self lives in perhaps a better state than the one that exists now, it allowed for us to, game the system, to not be subject to those limiting factors. And thus, we can never get enough, right? We can never convert enough of the natural world to the built environment that's subject to our will in a greater way. We just can't get enough of that because there's no limiter built in. And so the real limiter is in spirituality, is in that decoupling of this conceptual self from the energy body, and ultimately the belief in being the physical body, if there's to be an ascension. So there are a lot of channels that talk about, I guess, what would amount to Gnosticism, the idea that we're in some archonic matrix. I think, those sort of paradigms assign an intention to those structures or entities, and we can't take their perspective so much. I mean, those entities, so it's hard to say how they experience reality. Perhaps the best we can come up with is our own experience of reality, to the extent that much of what's perceived is the product of these fearful thought forms that hold us into a low vibration that seeks for relief in bending reality to the mind's ideal. The flavor of the energy body, while in, I guess, subjugation to the whims of the lower astral that feed on the juice that's produced or extracted through the energy body, through our reactions. We are all like popcorn kernels, and technology just heats us up, and some of us pop before the others, the outliers. But it seems like people are popping. It's hard to know really if this sort of drought of emotional intelligence that appears on social media and like YouTube, it's hard to know if that was going on all the time, because you didn't have this sort of window into it. It's like the Palantir in the Stephen King Dark Tower series, like the YouTube. Like you can see this channel on YouTube, or all these different channels. It's like seeing into this crystal ball, right? The Witch of the Coos, Ray, who had one of these Palantirs, like Stephen King wrote that, she just sat around and watched people getting it on all the time. And it's kind of like she had like a porn addiction, like before such a thing could exist, or in a time and place where there wasn't the technology. So she could see people in their most secret moments, and it drove her mad. And kind of that's I think what it does to us. But going back to what I was saying, it's hard to know if all this was going on. Like people have always been emotionally unstable, right? Crime statistics show that in the past, I think there was an explosion of crime in the 60s that dissipated later, and people have attributed that to abortion. Like in that show Orange is the New Black. I saw that when I used to watch TV. But I don't know, like it seems now like there's an awful lot of crime. Like there's been phases of it in places, like, during the Giuliani years of stop and frisk, they may have had less crime than they have now. But anyway, the kind of crime I'm talking about is like, these crash outs. I don't know. I think it's new. I don't think in like the 70s and there was a common occurrence of people just freaking out in public places and like attacking retail staff and restaurant workers. I don't know. Police interactions, we don't know much before the advent of body cams, but now with body cams, we see a lot of things. We can see the sort of mid-level corruption, firstly, because when a public figure gets pulled over for something serious like a DUI, they're always trying to big time the officers or get the officer to turn off their body cam. So, I mean, we've always been corrupt, and we've always been savage. It's like that. There's a meme out there of some Vikings raiding a monastery, and it's like no phones, no TV, just everybody being in the present. So it's not new. Like, the popcorn kernels have always been popping. It's just that the temperature's going up, like the rate at which things can be presented to the unconscious awareness, and the targeted nature of the content by technology, just making us pop, 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 pop. So the only way to, I think, survive it is to not take it seriously. So to either guard the senses and literally just disconnect from the flywheel, from the power transfer, right? You're not in gear, or just not exposed to it, or to seek the source of suffering, to seek the source of what is triggering. And if successful, then it'll be realized that it's ignorance that's the source of desire. The ignorance of believing that what's aware of phenomena is that, or that the phenomena is what's aware of itself. That you are the wall of the tunnel through the four-dimensional block universe, as opposed to the conscious space into which there's a projection. Like, reality is only relative reality. Like the forces that repel and hold magnets together are the same forces that we experience when we touch objects, right? So things can't pass through things because of how they vibrate. It's a projection, and our perception is a projection. We are perceiving the projection, but we are nothing in the projection. We are just the awareness that actually perceives a projection of the physical world from a non-physical space. But there is a believing, and that gives opportunity for subtle beings to manipulate and trigger, and thus control the vibration of the energy body and hold it to a level that creates a suffering and is palatable to those formations in consciousness. They feed off it. They don't exist without the attention that gives them the opportunity to appear within awareness, that gives them the ability to be in that projection. If we don't give them our attention by virtue of not believing in being the subject to which they purport to relate, then they just pass by and they just get no traction on the energy body. So it takes a noticing of suffering and a questioning of its source, combined with metacognition of noticing those thoughts and what they do, as opposed to just obeying them and trying to bend the world to circumstance. So in the face of this ever accelerating stream of triggering stimulation of events, then we are subject to the popcorn popper that's just getting hotter and hotter. So I don't know, maybe it fits with this idea of a mass awakening through this kind of turmoil, but I don't think so, because human history is just littered with disaster and people are still unconscious. But anyway, this video points it out. So there's a lot of channels like this who point it out. And what I can tell you is that this isn't conceptual. This isn't a guy looking at a book and telling you what somebody else wrote. This is the relation of the actual experience of the falling away of these parasites from the energy body, and the perception of the energy body's ascension in the absence of that encumbrance. They just fall away, and there's an expansiveness and an ascension in the vibrational level that eclipses the product of all the things that the voice in the head can point to, and in that there's a lack of dancing to the music of technologies that aim to get us to act. So it's kind of like there's two sides to it, right? There's the gross reaction and there's the subtle reaction. And so you have this idea of archonic forces, and then people who are in the thrall of archonic forces who use technology to generate loosh for these lower astral entities, but also at the same time manipulate the physical bodies to generate wealth, to cause people to act against their own self-interest in a way that creates a sort of a rent-seeking, I guess, just getting people, you're increasing the marginal propensity to consume by causing people to seek relief and bending the world to their will. And that can be a profitable endeavor for the person providing the means to do that bending. So the more abundant the harvest for the lower astral entities, the greater the marginal propensity to consume. And so there is naturally an incentive, regardless of any conscious allegiance to lower astral entities, there's an incentive to get people in this state of manipulability by virtue of there being like these handles of identity within them. So this technology that cultivates this identity, it causes people to be in a low state vibrationally that causes them to be easily manipulable.